Hello, thanks everyone for joining this very random presentation. I will be presenting my research today, but I gotta share my screen, so just give me a second while I figure out this technology. I'm quite old. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Good. I believe I'm recording. Okay. Um, yeah. I hope my face is recorded and also my presentation is also being shown. Let me open it for a second. Please don't worry about how messy my screen is. It's pretty messy, but that's not the point of this thing I'm doing here. Just let me double check to see if... Oh, I'm not even sharing my screen. Share settings. Oh, I am sharing my screen. Okay. There we go. All right. First of all, thank you guys for coming to my presentation. This was an amazing summer I spent with the Nomad team here at Sandia National Labs. So let me get started. Um, Essentially quantifying the effect of non-physical parameters on the nonlinear dynamics of an electromechanical ratcheting mechanism. Well, that's a long title, but essentially we're looking at this very small mechanism that kind of just keeps time. It's similar to the ratcheting mechanism in a watch, and we're just trying to see what happens when we try to simulate it and adjust parameters. Thanks everyone on my team, Brennan, Shunsuke, and all my advisors, and thank you to the University of New Mexico for hosting us. So we have Brennan Barr. We have this amazing person here. He's a mechanical engineering undergraduate at BYU. That's me, Alan. I'm at WPI doing my PhD, and that's Shunsuke Winston at UW, University of Washington, working on his PhD. So what is this? What are we working on? We're essentially, as I mentioned before, we're looking at this very small mechanism that goes into a watch. For commercial applications, and then we can also see this in aerospace applications, where there any kind of timing needs to be tracked. We have this little thing that just keeps ticking back and forth. So it's very sensitive and very susceptible to being affected by environmental changes such as shock, vibration. So we really need to find out how this shock, vibration, unpredictable nature of its surroundings kind of affects how it works. We do this by looking at FEA, finite element analysis modeling techniques, and using this kind of simulation method, we can kind of predict how the mechanism will kind of behave under these conditions. It's very challenging because these are very small mechanisms, and FEA is a sort of approximate sort of modeling technique. It can be very challenging to get very consistent results. So we have to see how we can get at these accurate results by kind of basically testing out different settings in the modeling software. First of all, I'm going to talk about this little rationing mechanism because it keeps time. It keep kind of maintains time, but exactly how does it work and what are the parts into it and how are we breaking it up into little subcomponents? Well, this is the explanation here. So this kind of mechanism is very small. I have a baseball on the left of it. It's much smaller than a baseball. The baseball is just the size of the overall platform. Essentially, that's how fast it's moving, and it consists of a big solenoid that just oscillates back and forth, which moves the drive pole, which is that kind of teal-colored thing, and it kind of pulls that big wheel incrementally, I think 10 degrees at a time. This is how it works in slow motion. So we got some big pulling action going on. It pulls, and then it rotates the wheel, and then that little thing on the bottom right kind of holds it into place. That's called the pawl. So just a very, this is just what is moving the wheel. Um, yeah, and then we have the system that kind of holds the wheel in place. This is the wheel. This is the system that we're really looking at. That little pawl kind of keeps the gear from slipping. That's the purple thing, and the hold pawl spring maintains the contact between the hold pawl and the gear so that it keeps it kind of jammed in there so the ratchet wheel doesn't slip back. So that's the system that we're studying, and we're using this thing to actually do our analysis. It's a finite element method, and essentially it consists of, what it does is it approximates how much a solid body will deform by discretizing it into very small elements. And it basically calculates the deformations between the little vertices on the elements when subject to external forces. So one of the things that are kind of used in this finite element method is the momentum balance iterations. That's the kind of calculation that checks to see how much a point moves in relation to another. Mesh density is very correlated to how many points that we have on this kind of discretized body. More points, the more dense, but it also makes it very processing intensive. And to speed up the entire calculations, we have processor count, which is just generally the more processors, the faster our kind of calculations run for, which is sort of very simple. And we are essentially saying, what happens when we change any of these parameters? Will we have different responses in our simulation? Will we see a increase in rotation, any kind of physical change? Since this little mechanism is so small, we are really kind of curious to see how sensitive it is to these parameters. So yes, we have our pawl assembly, and to make it easier to kind of see how this pawl assembly affects our system, we are breaking it up into three parts. This is the submodel shown here, the pin spring pawl, which is just the pin that holds the spring to the pawl, and we have the pin pawl, which is just that, and the pawl gear, which is just to see the interactions between the pawl and the gear. We're trying to also vary up our parameters from 1 to 100 for momentum balance iterations, mesh density from very fine or fine to very coarse, and just processor count from 50% to 250%. For environments, we're trying to see what kind of environments, what kind of responses we get from shock and vibration, and just mainly what happens when we put all these kinds of parameters, all these types of settings and environments to our system, and what happens to the performance and behaviors. To have some preliminary kind of approximation of what's going on, we first did an idealized model study where we simplified our analysis without use of FEM yet. We just kind of assumed many things, such as, okay, maybe a spring is just literally a spring, and we can just use like a general force calculation, stuff like that. Just very simple calculations, sort of like what we would do in like a physics course. And yeah, many approximations, such as we approximated the contact between pin pawls as a torsional spring, and we sort of simplified the pawl spring as just a constant force that doesn't change, stuff like that. So starting with our submodel, we applied boundary conditions to kind of limit our system and constrain it to a certain environment so it doesn't shift around. And we are interested in the contact force between the hold pole and the spring pin, just to see what kind of forces are going to be experienced by the pin when the hold pole is going through all those rotations and holding the gearing in place. This is a video. So essentially we are doing the shock. Yes, that's what it looks like. And sinusoidal vibration. That's what it looks like. This is directly taken from our FEM studies. We did notice that we did have a very difficult time trying to match our FEM results with our FEM, but generally, we kind of claim to say, is there a effect of changing a momentum balance iterations versus other things, and will it really change the values, or what will changing the values of the any kind of parameter affect our study too much? So for example, momentum balance iterations, we changed it from 1 to 100, and our results very largely stay the same, so we could claim that it is not sensitive. This is what our mesh density looks like, just mainly focusing on the contact surfaces. For mesh density, we also found very similar results, in which our results did not change much when we changed mesh density. And same thing for number of processors used. So this is sort of like a good result. We don't really see much happening when we change our parameter values, which is like, okay, these things shouldn't change. We want to have results no matter what kind of settings we use, and we shouldn't have our performance of our mechanism be dependent of something unrelated to the mechanism, such as how the processor used, how many processors you use, or how many meshes are selected for the model specifically. Now for the pinball submodel, this is to kind of study the effect that the hold pole has specifically on the hold pole pin. And we're looking at the pole rotation angle, which is important. Kind of keeps the angle, yeah, so we're looking at the pole rotation angle and also the contact force between the pin and pole when there's contact from the gear teeth. These are animations showing Haversine shock and sinusoidal vibration over pinball environments. Our pole rotation angle changing the momentum balance iterations was pretty close, and our Delays model was lined up much better than the previous submodel. But what we found was the contact force performance was very erratic, changing the momentum balance from 1 to 100. And it was even more erratic when we looked at momentum balance iteration, changing from 1 to 100 for sinusoidal vibration. You can kind of expect this. Sinusoidal vibration is much more, maybe chaotic is not the word, but more, it is more, it kind of brings out the sensitivities more as well. It looks like for mesh densities, mainly the contact areas between fine and very coarse were affected by this mesh density study. We kind of found similar results as before. The less precise our parameters were, there was more of a divergence from our idealized model, and the contact force is still erratic. Sinusoidal vibration kind of looks like the same. Now for number of processors used, we saw pretty interesting results because it was much more minimal in the differences that we observed between this and everything, the other parameters. But contact force was still erratic. But overall, we could say that this is less sensitive. Very predictable. Sinusoidal vibration is very erratic, much larger than that of Heverson's shock. Now for the Paul gear submodel. So Paul's gear submodel is specifically focusing on the interaction between the Paul and the ratchet wheel, which is also called the gear ratchet wheel with the gears. In order to kind of simulate this, we have a prescribed displacement. So we're essentially just kind of estimating the behavior by changing the position of the wheel, just moving it up and down and stuff like that, and then fixing the whole Paul into place. Just there, and then we're looking at the Paul rotation when the ratchet wheel just kind of keeps going up and down. This is what the animations look like. It kind of bounces up and down. So we noticed these results when we did our test. Overall, there is okay, first I should explain, like, the gray thing that you see is the Haversan shock that is being applied, and overall there's convergence. There's some slight phase shift between the simulation results and the idealized model, which accounts for a gap being existing between gear and the Paul at the start of the simulation. Now for sinusoidal vibration, it's very random, but overall the kind of bounces, the angular changes very closely, or they approximate the sinusoidal vibration frequency, but we can't really say much about how the angle changes with respect to the momentum balance iterations. It seems like it's extremely sensitive. So for mesh density, this is what it looks like going from fine to very coarse, and yeah. Generally, we are looking to kind of maintain well, not much can be said here. So we have very similar results as before. Mesh density kind of mirrors the momentum balance iterations case. Same thing for here. Now for processor count, we have some interesting studies, some interesting results in which every single core count kind of results in the same behavior. It's pretty ideal, but in the previous submodels, we did not experience this. Maybe this is because many cores were used, maybe not. But yeah, this is what we got. Same thing for sinusoidal vibration. Well, actually not the same thing. No matter what, each behavior was exactly the same, which is nice. So we could kind of say that when we adjust processor count, nothing changes, everything stays the same. Processor count does not change any kind of displacement or geometry of any kind of, yeah, it doesn't change physical parameters, it just changes how fast the simulation runs for. So this is sort of an ideal. So this is a summary. We can see that Pin Spring Paul had pretty good results, pretty converging, and we had most of our weird experiences with the pin Paul, trying to see how the pin of the Paul interacts with the Paul. Maybe this could be because of there are small gaps between the Paul and the pin that kind of cause some erraticness, but that's all we got. So we kind of are able to make some assumptions on how on why these results are existing. For example, like, okay, pin Paul. Okay, what can I say? Yeah, like there are small vibrations between pin Paul and Paul gear. Vibration is very difficult because now we're dealing with friction. But pin spring Paul has no friction involved, no contact. It's just pulling during the whole thing. So based on this, we could kind of predict what we can study in the future. What we want to do later is we want to combine submodels and see how overall these effects on the submodel level affect the whole system, and that will allow us to kind of get like more of a cohesive study. Thank you. Goodbye.